Hey folks, Scott Fischer here, and guess what? I got a doozy for you this time. Oh my God, I got to paint Black friggin Lotus for Magic the Gathering. For real, check it out. All right, here we go. Well, that, my friends, is the final painting you're checking out right there. Looking all cool, nice and creepy. Black Lotus flower glowing out of the head, man. We love that stuff. Here it is on a card, man. That looks amazing, but maybe you noticed something about this card. That's right. When we scan down to the bottom of it, it's going to say 2023 North American Vintage Championship. That's because this is actually a prize. That's right. The physical painting is a prize, and they will frame it as a Magic card. How crazy is that? So it won't be actually printed as a Magic card. It's going to be given away at the Eternal Championship in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania this December. And I was stoked to be able to contribute to the show that way. Check it out. Here's my sketches that we started with. I did a combination of the two. On the left, you can see a diagonal through them, and there's a little blow up of what the rough drawing was. Now, that's what I sent in for sketch approval, and they were really down with it. So what I did was I cleaned it up in the computer, added some more contrast, and did some fills in, and I printed that out, and I coated it with a cream acrylic paint. You can see that cream kind of hanging out at the top. Now I'm going at it with FW acrylic inks. You know I love these things in the little bottles. I'm just using the sepia. Here I am making a mess, spattering all kinds of stuff on there, air drying it so I get those drips to just freeze in time. My goal with this whole painting is to actually treat the whole thing pretty subtly for me. I want a lot of blurring and obscuring and just ambiguity to happen within this. I kind of want the skull to almost be a secondary read. I mean, you're gonna notice it, but I want the flower to be the first thing to notice. Then you're like, oh my God, that flower is growing out of the head. So it's a lot of washes and thin paint to start with. You can see those light washes I put down. Then slowly I'm just adding a little bit more pigment to my brush and going darker and darker and darker. Adding a few more extra values up around the lotus flower itself. And the plan here is to do a sepia underpainting, and then we'll take this into color later as we progress through the piece. So I was blending a lot with the acrylics, but now I've moved to oil paint because I just wasn't getting the ambiguity I needed, right? So with oil paint, I got a little bit of extra blending time. So from this point on, the whole entire painting is going to be oil paint. And man, that was a good call to do. I got lots of awesome glazing techniques and was able to just kind of rub on, translucent areas and then spatter turpentine in there to eat it and to get more texture, because I'm a texture junkie. And this painting is going to be all about some sweet, sweet textures. So I was able to just obliterate some of the design that had already been painted in acrylic, and then I'll go back in and I'll reestablish all that stuff with more oil paint as we go through. But the thing is it's all being painted wet and wet primarily, right? So wet oil paint, adding more wet oil paint to that. And what that's gonna do, of course, is make some beautiful transitions and beautiful blends happen really fast. I can go in with one pigment, and as I work that same pigment on my brush, it's gonna mix with the lighter paint that's underneath there, and we're gonna get those beautiful, beautiful blends that I'm after. Building up those details in the skull itself, of course. And there's just a lot of guesswork in this painting. I don't have a really beautiful undervalue study to go with. I'm just kind of happen to be in the moment with the piece and just read what's happening in front of me. You see, I just added the teeth down there. I thought it'd be cool to make them sort of a silhouette. However, I actually wasn't supposed to paint anything down there. The whole painting has to be cropped specifically for a Magic the Gathering format. But I couldn't help myself. I went ahead and I painted in all this cool stuff, and now I'm taking I'm taking like a little eyedropper tool, like a pipette, and I'm putting oil paint in it and squeezing it down on the surface. Now we're able to go back in and do a little bit more with the oil paint and pump up those details around the lotus flower, trying to make it magical a little bit. And I couldn't help but finally grab a color, even though I was gonna do this monochromatically, and I just made a little bit of purple magic happen on top of the lotus flower. That's all working out as we slowly do these like secondary lights and edge lights, and that is the finished underpainting, right? So the idea originally was to just do my oil paint right on top of this and just keep going with the color. An interesting thing happened for me though, because I fell in love with those teeth, and I would have actually had to crop the painting down about where my thumb is, above that almost to the nose, and I couldn't see myself doing that, right? Because if you look here, you can kind of see where the final crop is going to have to be, and we would lose everything underneath that nose. And man, taking a saw to my underpainting didn't sound like a good idea. So what I did instead is I printed out my underpainting. I printed out the oil painting and I remounted that on a cradled panel. So there you go. Everything you see right there is a print at the moment of my underpainting. And now I get out the oil paint and I'm painting everything else all over again. So this whole thing will be covered with oil paint once again, but I was able to preserve my, sepia sort of underpainting sketch, which had a lot of looseness and a lot of life. I actually didn't really want to bury it with paint by the time I finished with it. So we set that aside, we preserved it, and now we're going back in with the oil paint and digging in on another level. Slowly pushing those darks. You'll see I start with like a lighter gray, or a lighter purple gray in that case, and then I just start adding a little bit more purple and a little bit more Van Dyke brown, and I just start pushing things darker and darker into those crevices. But look at the blends, right? That's what oil paint is all about, is those sweet, sweet blends that you can get. The thing with acrylic is those strokes will dry so fast that I want to quite have the opportunity to blur areas out and do fun things like that. Resin up the detail on those leaves and in the skull itself, on the bridge of the nose. And just kind of abstractly filling in some of the vegetation. You don't need to know what every leaf is and every blade of grass is. Right, again, it's all about that ambiguity. Working those opaques right out to the outside again, and this is all still wet and wet. So it's blending with that green oil paint that's underneath there already. And it's interesting how rarely I actually clean off my brush. It's usually with a complete value change or a color change that I do. Otherwise, I just keep dipping the same brush in the same paint so that it slowly mixes on the brush itself. And you can see me pushing those petals of the Black Lotus darker and darker. We need that to be the highest point of contrast in the piece. And that's, of course, it's the Black Lotus. People have to notice the lotus flower. I can't just let it be all obscured. The special effect that was going to happen inside, I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to pull it off. I messed with it a little bit in the sepia piece, but in the purple here, I had to really think about how I was going to light up all those individual seeds. Notice the gradient that's happening as I take the tips of the flower darker, so that way the glow stays within around that seed pod. I got a big brush out there for a second, and I would just fan brush it and just drag some of my wet oil paint into itself, and that just gives you a nice little blend as well. And getting a little more expressive with a liner brush to add these weird glowy globs. I don't know, pollen? Maybe it's pollen. Yeah, the lotus flower is producing. I don't know. Scrubbed that one out and redid it. Used a little rubber tool to clean up the edges on some of them. And now we're just going to add a little bit of a warmer green to areas of this. I didn't want the whole thing to be in that, aqua-y blue green. I wanted to get a little bit more yellow in there. And there you go, my friends, the final painting. And here it is, scanned into the computer, looking pretty cool. And that is the crop that is going to wind up inside the card. But guess what? I went ahead and extended that composition too to make playmats. So guess what, folks? There's going to be playmats of this Black Lotus on our website. The link's going to be down below in the description, and you can get prints of it as well. I hope to see you guys at Eternal Weekend. I hope you dug Black Lotus. Let me tell you, I've been doing magic since the 90s. To do Black Lotus, whatever form it's going to be, for Wizards of the Coast, was friggin' awesome, man. Bucket list, check. We'll see you guys next time.